सा सब भैया ये समझते हैं। ये फार्मर नॉलेज सेंटर है जो बैंगलोर कर्नाटका आप देख सकते हो आइए मुझे देखते सबमिट किया अच्छा है क्या यहाँ पर
the governance at the grassroots, the democracy at the grassroots, many social challenges can be solved, and the term what we say in development, democratizing development, can be easily achieved through the grassroots. For these juncture, I also want to bring to your notice that democracy is not a new thing for our country. Take the cases of Vaishali Vadi. We had a state of republic at that era, 2,500 years ago. You would be surprised to hear that features like universal franchise, general assembly, civic rights of voting, deliberations, application of procedures, system of committees and appeals were existed then. And coming to my own state, Karnataka, I think I must take you through a few glimpses of democracy. In 7th century, when Badami Chalukyas were ruling, they constituted village committees, village assemblies, to take care of law and order villages. When we all know about Basavanna, we call Patwaj Anna Basavanna here, the Lord Basaveshwara, who was a social revolutionary who created Anubhava Mandapa, an academy of saints and philosophers discussing, deliberating about democracy, about creating a system which is free from caste and creed, and it was upholding human values. It subsequently considered as a genesis for parliamentary system in India. And the Karnataka passed the first Panchayat and Local Bodies Act in 1959, and later it became the country's story. And erstwhile Wadiyars of Mysuru, the city where I come from, franchise of voting, voting has happened in the city of Mysuru in 1892 to elect representation for municipality units. That being the legacy and that being the story of democracy in India. But we still have certain challenges. Think it is something like this and others and also deliberate. If you take the percentage of voting that's happening, actually it was stagnated between 2004 and 9 at 58 to 58.2%. But what is good is in the last 15 years we have found an increase of 9% in the voter turnout in India when it comes to 2019 election. While we can be happy that in last voting turnout ratio to 67.4%, you should also think about those 33% who are either not able to cast their franchise vote or not choose to vote. In 2010, roughly translated into 30,000 crore people either not voting or not able to vote in this country. How we can increase the voting participation? That I was part of the distance study. Amongst various alarming findings, the one I want to bring to your notice here today is 17% of respondents was influenced by head of the households or the head of the village to vote whom, and around 20% did not intend to vote. Could not vote is different, but 20% said did not intend to vote. Despite having most discussed demographic dividend in India, we are at 122nd position out of 181 countries. Coming to my own state, we rank 8th in the country, and if you consider youth participation in engagement, in civic engagement, and their participation in democratic engagement, the index is at 0.21, 0.3. It is really disappointing. And we have a sizable population in the age group of 10 to 24, but look at our curricular pedagogy system. How are we really creating informed voters through our systematic pedagogical intervention? And there are a lot of youths out there in the community who are not part of education system, and how we are considering them. These are the questions we need to, challenges we need to encounter, and there are some of the questions for all of us to discuss. I quote Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Once he said, political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of social democracy. But the question now is how to thrive or strengthen social democracy in India. Despite having the demographic dividend, we are not participating. Our youth, we are all not taking part actively in our civic engagement and democratic participation. And more importantly, in polity, we call actually the three dimensions of people's polity. One is limits of rulers, accountability on the rulers, and third and most important is people's people's direct or indirect participation in governance and their right of self-governance. While first two can be regulated or stipulated through various institutions of constitution, but the third one can only be facilitated. It cannot be regulated. How all of us can increase the decentralization of local self-government. And we talk about minimum government and maximum governance. While we have a stringent government accountability framework on one side, on the other side, we expect people to participate, and people are not participating enough. How we can have minimum government and maximum governance at that level? And most importantly, the inclusive democracy. There are people from the marginalized sections. There are people with disability to take part in political participation. How we can increase that? And the beauty of democracy, I call this as democratic ethos and electoral pathos. The beauty of democracy is giving voice to voiceless and power to marginalized. But the reality of politics is giving opportunity to the fittest who can win elections. How we can ensure an equilibrium between this democratic ethos and political pathos. And most importantly, how we can move from enforced engagement to empowered engagement. With this, I stop my initial thoughts for this panel. I am sure my learned panelists, of course, with all of your participation, would discuss upon these and many other issues in the next 1 hour. Thank you so much. Yeah. First, And we will go with your presentation. First we will go with the
Yes, so we do have the presentation next. So ladies and gentlemen, once again I would request you all to please welcome, please once again give a huge round of applause for Ms.
Thank you all for a very warm welcome. And friends, the subject on which I am speaking today is the Indic roots of Indian democracy. So, why do I call the title of this presentation the Indic roots of Indian democracy? Further I talk about creating a democracy Indian style. So why do I do this? Why do I call creating a democracy Indian style? I say so because I believe that we as Indians, all of us in our country have civilizational values of consensus and working values of consensus that have contributed to creating a uniquely Indian democracy, which is very different in many ways from how it is practiced in other countries. It is very important for all of us as a people to recognize that. Hence this title, I shall touch upon this further in my presentation. So, India is without doubt the most youthful nation in the world.
तो टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लम हो गया है, लाइट को लेकर के देख सकते हो जो भारत के युवा हैं सभी जिले से लोग हैं।
And providing leadership. All of you know that from first India has assumed leadership of the G20 group of countries. This is a group of countries that contributes to 75% of the trade in the world and 85% of the GDP. It is a unique opportunity for India to and to help in bringing about peace building and reconciliation and in so many other ways. In order to provide that leadership, every Indian should be aware of their traditions of democracy. What are those traditions? Okay. The modern constitution of India is often talked about as the great document, and it is often argued that it is because we have the Indian constitution that we have rule of law in India. And friends, my submission to you is slightly different. I think that we should not confuse cause and effect. It is India's constitution is as it is because it has been crafted by constitution makers who were aware of our civilizational values, of a desire for consensus and a dislike for coercion. It is because these are our civilizational values that we were able to craft this constitution for ourselves. Why do I talk about civilizational values and a dislike for coercion? My suggestion to you is, please look around you. Wherever you go, you will see that Indians try to get along with each other. That while there is a broad respect for rules, at the same time, Indians do not like to force their will on the other person. And the most basic example, which all of you as students are aware, every student has to get a minimum attendance in order to take that exam. सही है? हर किसी को attendance चाहिए होती है, नहीं तो exam में faculty member to ask him or her कि sir मेरी attendance कम है, please allow me to take the exam. And I suggest to all of you that in 9 cases out of 10, your faculty member would say, never mind, I will do all I can to help you to take that exam. ऐसा नहीं होता, ऐसा ही होता है ना? होता है ना? तो क्या बोलोगे इसको? Desire to get along with everyone. The desire not to force your will on everyone. I will take you to another example. When you look at how policemen in the field, they are asked to observe traffic rules. I have seen so many instances when they stop a person and say, सर आप ओवर स्पीडिंग कर रहे थे, मुझे आपका चालान काटना है। और उसके बाद जब उसने किसी को रोका, then that man says कि भाई why do you insist on making me pay this challan? I have seen policemen who argue very patiently with that passenger and tell him, sir, I have been authorized by you under the Motor Vehicles Act of this country, and it is my job to enforce those traffic rules. I respectfully ask you to pay this challan. That is important. That we try to explain the law to other people, that we take everyone along with us. And it is these civilizational values that are reflected in this constitution that we have given to ourselves. So, we have the civilizational values of a desire for consensus and a dislike of cohesion combined with a robust institutional framework to underpin those values. So, when we talk about the value of the constitution, why is it so important? After all, when we go back in our history, we see that there were many benevolent kings. We all know about Ashoka, who had edicts engraved on stone in different parts of the country. Yes, no doubt there are benevolent kings. But when we talk about democracy and we talk about the rule of law, we need a framework of rules which binds the state to observe rule of law, which binds the state to observe freedom. That is why a framework of rules is very important. And when we look at how those rules were crafted, let's look at the massive effort that was involved in discussion and debate. When we look at these active discussions over crafting the Indian Constitution, they begin from the 1920s onward and right up to 1950s. These active discussions, which are spread over 20 to 30 years, they involved over 600 people. If you look just at the Constituent Assembly debate, they involved some 300 members. These people, if you take a very, very narrow and a conservative look at it, they spent 200,000 man-hours to discuss the rules that would form the basis of independent India. And if you look at it in its entirety, they spent 49 million man-hours in discussing the Constitution. Friends, I would also like to point out to you that 60% of the Muslim members of the Constituent Assembly chose to remain with us. So that is the kind of discussion and debate that has gone into crafting the Indian Constitution. What emerged and what has been guiding us till today is showed a desire to involve everyone in the tasks of and to remove points of friction. It is this desire to involve everyone in the tasks of governance that is a key attribute of democracy. Of the choices that were finally made by the Constituent Assembly, I would invite you to look at just 3 choices. Think back to 1947. Notice the context. There were fault lines in the fabric of Indian society. There were fault lines along so many categories. All of you come from different states in the nation. Many of you speak different languages. And after that, the Constituent Assembly framers had a great confidence in the common sense of the people of India. In 1947, we still had a substantially illiterate population. After that, the Constitution framers chose to go in for universal adult primary. Even though there were many people who said that, the right to vote should be restricted to those who have property. It was not agreed to. They all agreed to provide universal adult franchise. They all agreed to provide reservations for helpless and depressed classes. They all agreed to provide the rights of religious and linguistic minorities. And today, in 2023, when we look back at 75 years of India's independence, we notice that all three choices have been substantially maintained. They have not been disturbed. This in itself is a major illumination of how Indians believe in democratic values. So, why do you think the constitution framers had so much belief in these civilizational values? Friends, I suggest to you that they had this belief because they did have a sense of common destiny and purpose. When we are crafting a nation, it is this sense of common destiny, common purpose and ethos that unites all of us. All of them were aware that we have overthrown a yoke of 200 years of colonial rule. They all knew that these fault lines exist among us. And yet, they were all sure that in the constitution that they were framing for us, there should be, everyone has a right to expect equal and fair treatment in the broadest sense of the word. And that understanding is something that has remained in all these years. So many people can ask, why do we really need such a constitution after all? If we are all imbued with these democratic desires for consensus and cohesion, why do we need it?